So you see something very purposeful there. Perhaps this was an effort to make us use a lot of our weapons that we may need in a near-peer conflict. If we ever had to go to war with China or Russia, these are the kinds of weapons that we actually use, and we had to use them against basically a third world kind of threat. Hi, my name is Armen, Kurdian, retired U.S. Navy captain, 25 years of service, naval flight officer, a test pilot school graduate, and I'm also a candidate for the California State Senate. So the night of December 22nd, 2024, there was a friendly fire incident where the USS Gettysburg fired two Standard Missile 2s at a couple of incoming F/A-18 Super Hornets. What had happened is that was a very busy night, and these aircraft were out there taking down drones because the Houthi rebels had launched a rather concerted strike against the strike group, shooting missiles and drones, not just against us, but also, of course, against Israel. So there were a lot of targets in the air. So in this theater, going over there, when the Houthi rebels were started to shoot all these targets, this was something new for the strike group, and we had to adapt to those kinds of tactics. At the time when those Hornets are coming back, there are standard procedures for when aircraft come back to the ships, specifically to prevent what actually happened from happening. What happened in this case was there was kind of a series of events, and it's called, when a lot of things happen that go wrong, you call it like the Swiss cheese effect. All the holes tend to line up for that something bad to happen. It's very, very rare that one single event, unforeseen, not preventable, happens that causes something to happen. In this case, it seems like the IFF on the ship was not operating properly. There was a turnover, and the new watchstanders were not made aware of this, or they weren't aware of it. And when the aircraft popped up on the radar, they showed up as unknowns. But ultimately, they decided that these aircraft were coming in profile. I mean, obviously, they're pointed towards the carrier. So at the time, if you didn't know any better, didn't know anything else, you'd think there were two targets that were coming at the carrier. Perhaps they should have seen that none of the other aircraft that were coming in had their IFF on, or were not tracking as IFF. That should have been perhaps something they should have noticed. So they fired those two missiles. The aircraft at first thought they were shooting at drones, and then when they realized what was happening, one aircraft that was unable to evade, they just ejected immediately. The other aircraft started to evade, and then fortunately they quickly figured out what was happening, and the missile was basically deactivated. It broke lock from the ship, so that the missile basically went stupid and then shot off into the middle of the air. The one thing to understand in these kinds of situations and circumstances is it seems like this is stupid, this is crazy. Why would they do something like that? Everybody is a highly trained professional. Everybody is working real good, but even the best of us, sometimes in the most stressful of circumstances, will make mistakes and things will happen. We train as hard as we can. We spend years of our lives training for these kinds of situations in a combat zone. And friendly fire has been happening for thousands of years. You try to minimize it, you try to reduce it, you try to prevent it from happening, but it's impossible to get down to zero. The only way to get down to zero is simply not to go out and operate, because you still have friendly incidents sometimes that happen even during times of peace, sadly. So when something goes wrong in the Navy, if there's an accident, it's called a mishap. And ultimately, there are always investigations that go into these mishaps. What was the causal factor? What happened? And very, very often, it is a mixture of human and mechanical error. Sometimes it's only human error, and in rare circumstances, rarer than you might think, it's something that's purely mechanical. More often than that, you find that it's purely human error, that something actually went wrong, and people were to blame, whether it was training, whether it was fatigue, all those kinds of things. If you go back to the days of World War II, and you look at the number of incidents that happened, accidents, training accidents, or whatever, I mean, it would blow your mind the number of times there were accidents, aircraft shooting each other down, or just a training accident, improper training, improper maintenance. It was just a fact of life. You planned on losing a certain percentage of your ships or planes or tanks because you accidentally shot each other. Over time, there has been just a Herculean effort to bring that number down with naval safety, the NATOPS program, advanced training, and has really, really cut the number of those incidents down significantly. But you think now, we don't have nearly as many planes as we did in the past because one plane can do the work of, a few squadrons worth back in World War II. So you feel the impact of a loss of an aircraft, $60, $70 million airplane, hopefully not the aircrew itself, when these things actually happen. But it is a big challenge. We got a lot of things exposed during the Red Sea conflict that showed that we could go through these weapons in a hurry. And then ultimately you see we're trying to shoot down these $10,000 drones with $1 million missiles, which we have a very limited supply of, and these drones are very easy to make. So you see something very purposeful there, that perhaps this was an effort to make us use a lot of our weapons that we may need in a near-peer conflict. If we ever had to go to war with China or Russia, these are the kinds of weapons that we actually use, and we had to use them against basically a third world kind of threat. So it's something that the U.S. military has recognized and said we need more of these weapons, but we also need better tactics to take down this almost revolution in warfare. There's a lot of lessons learned for the U.S. military that came out of this that are going to be applied. It's going to take some time to actually make it happen. But it was very consequential what happened in that conflict, and the U.S. actually gained a lot by bringing this war to an end.